From beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, it is the Neglected News Report. I'm your co-host, Scott Mitchell, here with my brother, Kevin.
Welcome.
And what a week. What a week, folks. And it's just, this summer is just on fire. But at least from a climatic point of view, it's starting to get cooler, but that doesn't mean everything else is cooling down. I mean, it's been an interesting week here. I mean, we started off with the death of Robin Williams. We got more about the Christians being held on the mountaintop by the ISIL, ISIS, Islamic State, whatever the heck you want to call it. We've got more of Obama playing golf while the world burns. I mean, all kinds of stuff, guys.
What is it? I think it's been 185 rounds of golf he's played in the...
I think it was more like 300 some is what I read.
Oh.
I thought.
That bad.
Yeah.
And if you've seen his swing, he hasn't improved very much.
Does he swing like he throws a baseball?
Pretty much. Kind of sissy.
Or like he rides a bicycle.
With his Urkel helmet on and his grandma jeans.
Yeah, pretty much. But anyway. Yeah, it was an interesting week. We also had an addition to the family on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? It's Tuesday.
Tuesday, yes.
Tuesday, Kevin became a grandpa for the second time.
Yes. Mason. Huge
kid, 9 pounds, 4 ounces, 21 inches long.
Yep.
He's bigger than his cousin Wesley, and Wesley was big.
9.2.
Yep.
He's growing big down here.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hope he grows tall now to offset the bigness as he gets older.
Yeah, well, we're pretty tall, too.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start?
I don't know. I'll let you start.
Well, I think the place to start, because it ties into this whole border thing. Again, the border is still up there as far as importance is concerned. Texas's Rick Perry was indicted for coercion for a veto threat in Texas. Now, he's being indicted on 2 accounts. One's a first-degree felony that carries a sentence of between 5 and 99 years, and the second is a third-degree felony, and I'm not sure about the length of time that he could possibly spend in jail if convicted. And all this because in, was it earlier this year, or was it last year, Scott? Do you remember? Anyway, it seemingly is a local political story. It seems that Rosemary Lemberg, who is the county district attorney and a Democrat, was convicted of drunken driving. And she was pulled over, and she had like a .22. It's an extreme DUI. You would be spending time in Sheriff Joe's tent city.
.22 is like 3 times the legal limit.
It's 3 times the legal limit, and you would be spending time you'd be probably spending 30 days in our jail here in Maricopa County.
And a little bit of truth here. I have spent 24 hours in Tent City. I got a DUI back in 1998. I ain't never going to get one again. That's back when the law was not nearly as strict as it is now.
Well, I wouldn't have been admitting that, but anyway. So anyway, she was convicted of drunken driving, and not only was she convicted, but she was abusive, and she was, you can go on YouTube and see this. You can see her in the cell, kicking the door, being verbally abusive to the people around her, and eventually she had to be restrained. They put a spitting mask on her, and she basically was insinuating. She was asking if they knew who blah 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 was. I forget the name because he's a local and I'm not familiar with him. Basically throwing her weight around, and she has a little bit of that too. And basically saying, "Hey, wait till he finds out. Are you going to be in trouble?" Well, all this plays out, and Perry called for her to resign. Well, she didn't resign, so instead of he has the right as the holder of the purse strings to not fund her department. And it was he promised $7.5 million he promised over 2 years to hold back. Well, lo and behold, now all of a sudden, let me back up a little bit. I don't know if you know this, but within the last week or so, Perry also deployed the National Guard to the border. Well, when Jan Brewer tried doing something similar on our borders, tried to stem the flow somewhat, she was basically the Obama administration sued the state of Arizona and ended up winning. So don't think that this local political story is unconnected to the whole border issue. Obama is miffed that that Rick Perry's actually doing something. This is my take, and I think you'll find as time progresses that it will be the truth. You're going to find out this has nothing to do with this petty little county district attorney Rosemary Lemberg, and has everything to do with Rick Perry using his own gubernatorial powers to help stem the tide of these illegals coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's really, excuse my language, pissing Obama off. You can't go against the king. This is a regal presidency.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's almost identical to the Scott Walker issue. The people, the legislators in his state didn't like the way he ran the office, so they decided to vote him out.
Well, that's what typically liberals do. Well, they can't win with votes, or they can't win in a public forum, with the free flow of an exchange of ideas. They use the court system. They destroy you. Mm-hmm. Who was that? What state was that, Scott? A few years ago, when the state legislatures actually fled the state and holed up in a.
That was Wisconsin.
Was that Wisconsin?
That was Wisconsin.
I was thinking it was Chicago or something. Sounds like
it was during the protest, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to take my ball and go home. We can't win. Yeah. We can't win at the ballot box. We can't win with public opinion, so we're not going to play.
And keep in mind, they were the ones that lost. They were the ones that lost.
Yeah, they lost.
Yeah.
And they were actually defied. They were actually ordered to come back, didn't. And eventually they did come back, and they mounted a recall election of Scott Walker, which he repelled and ended up winning. And there are these nutsos, and I have a friend that's one of them, who just posts nothing but nonstop anti-Walker, just defaming him and just calling them criminals, and they've done everything they can, and they're still trying to destroy him.
Yeah, it's political. It's nothing but politics. And to destroy your enemy, it's Saul Alinsky tactics. It's rules for radicals 101.
But this is a good example of how the guns are being aimed inward instead of outward. Instead of protecting our borders and instead of protecting us against this influx of illegals, many of whom are breaking our laws not only by crossing, but are violent criminals, instead of aiming our guns at them, we're aiming them at our own people. Essentially, it's a metaphor, but we're aiming our guns at Governor Perry for doing what any normal governor would do to protect his people, to protect his job. They did an interview with this one Texas rancher, and you know what his biggest concern was, other than being overrun by illegals, was that he was going to be sued by illegals for maybe dying on his ranch, maybe hurting themselves on his ranch. That's his biggest fear, because he knows that not only will our federal government not protect him, but they will prosecute him. They will be the ones supplying the lawyers to these people if they so choose to sue.
And don't you see a political agenda here, folks? It's all politics. It is what's the word I'm looking for? It is to consolidate your base. They're trying to consolidate a base of illegal aliens coming to this country that will become future voters that'll vote for them for all the goodies that they're giving them now.
But it's even more insidious than that.
That they could further their agenda. That's why.
Call me a conspiratorialist. Call me whatever you want. But again, we've spoken about this. George Herbert Walker Bush, George W.'s father, talked about the New World Order, talked about the one world government many, many, many years ago. It's been 25 or more years. Well, what the plan is to have 10 economic regions throughout the world. One of those economic regions is the North American, which is to encapsulate Canada, United States, Mexico, and possibly Central America. So what you're seeing right now is the erasing of our borders, and it has an end result. Mm-hmm. So
of course it does.
So look at the big picture. Don't always, forget the BS about the children and it's not about the children. That was purposely inserted in there. I mean, the children was part of the formula because they know that the liberals have been using the children for years for many things, and this is just another one.
And by extension, women. Because they know everyone's got a soft spot in their hearts for women and children.
Well, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of these people coming over the border are not children. And if you've seen them, some of them are horrendous. Some of the MS-13 people, you don't want those people in your neighborhood. I can tell you what. And I got another article here. It's going to take me a second to find, Scott, if you want to blab on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The thing that irritates me is also they use children as their basis for argument, to try to as their foundational argument, but they also bring in the fact that America is a country of immigrants. Yeah, legal immigrants, and not only that, legal who can contribute to the betterment of the society. What are all these tattoo and tattoo-ridden and body-pierced ridden gang hoodlums, gangsters,
and in the old
going to contribute?
And in the old days, when the immigration was coming in the late 19th century, we had a place called Ellis Island. It was called Ellis Island. What they did was you were detained there for this. Excuse me, this is Breitbart, man. This is that stupid website. I love Breitbart, but they've got all these pop-ups that I can't control, and this is one of them. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. They had Ellis Island. Not only did they interview you, found out where you were from, what your intentions were, they also screened you for diseases. Yep. And there was a reason why you were detained for a certain amount of time at Ellis Island. This we have no idea who's coming over. We don't even know if there hasn't been somebody that has Ebola that's crossed our border. And we won't know because there's an incubation period.
As if scabies isn't bad enough.
So this next article I want to talk to you about actually plays into what we're just talking about. Basically, it's more on the level of they're pointing their guns inside at us. Who instead of this next article makes me mad because it's about who the Department of Homeland Security considers the biggest threat to America. And no, it's not ISIS, although ISIS just said this week that they will be planting a black ISIS flag at the White House sooner or later. And no, it's not Al-Qaeda. One of its leaders said a few weeks ago, that he'll see us in New York. It's not them. It's not the Taliban. It's no terrorist group. It's American-grown people that the government is afraid has anti-American values or whatever.
And remember this, people. Your government doesn't give a darn about you. They honestly don't. You're a tool to further their ends.
So listen to this article. This is from Breitbart. It's a leaked document from the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis predict an increase in anti-government violence over the next year. I think there hasn't been any violence to begin with, but there's definitely anti-government sentiment. And I think there's every reason for there to be anti-government sentiment. Mm-hmm. There's a correlation between the government clamping down on the people and anti-government sentiment, but there hasn't been violence. So it says DHS 7-page report titled "Domestic Violent Extremists Pose a Threat to Government Officials and Law Enforcement" points to the recent murders of 2 Las Vegas law enforcement officers as evidence that there's a growing trend of anti-government violence compared to the previous 4 years, and inspired by perceived government overreach and oppression and the perceived victory at Bunkerville that will likely prompt more violence. That's Bundy's, the standoff at the Bundy Ranch. They call it Bunkerville. Bundy's 20-year legal dispute with the BLM over grazing fees on federal land escalated when the agency attempted to seize his cattle in the beginning of April. An armed standoff between the BLM and supporters of Bundy ensued until the feds backed off before any serious violence erupted and left the 67-year-old rancher's land. Jared and Amanda Miller, a husband and wife, were at the Bundy Ranch, later killed 3 people in Las Vegas, including 2 police officers, before killing themselves. The 2 left an ominous note, swastika and Gadsden flag by the bodies of both officers. First of all, the swastika and the Gadsden flag have nothing to do with one another.
No, not at all.
These were obviously nut jobs. There is no correlation between the Gadsden flag and a swastika. They are mutually exclusive symbols. They have nothing to do with one another. In fact, they're antithetical to one another. But anyway.
Also, the point has to be made that since this is close to Vegas, do not confuse Bundy Ranch with Bunny Ranch. There is a D there.
But anyway, Amon Bundy, son of rancher Cliven Bundy, told the Associated Press the Millers were not welcome at the ranch and were kicked out after a few days, calling them very radical and that they didn't align themselves with the Bundy's protest movement. These incidents had took place in the South and the West since 2010, and that DHS counts as a surge in militia and lone offender extremist events with anti-government motivation and targets are, in other words, that was very, very wordy, but they're saying these are the sentence. Yeah, it's a run-on. These are the groups that the government needs to be looking out for. The Alaska Militiamen, ever heard of them? Get this one, Waffle House Plot in Georgia.
Who?
The Waffle House Plot in Georgia.
Will they meet in a Waffle House?
I don't know. Another one's called...
Well, hang on. If they meet in a Waffle House, there is something wrong with them.
Another one's called Fear Militia. Another one's called LAX Shootings. Another one's XXX Militia Splinter Group. That sounds like a porno one. Bunkerville Ranch, Texas Militia Plot, Las Vegas Shootings. So from the report... Now, these are groups no one's ever heard of because they haven't done anything.
That's what my point was this. So what? Until they do anything, so what?
The Black Panther Party constantly threatens violence. In fact, they're doing it right now in Ferguson.
You know what the U.S. government, what they're trying to do? Your Homeland Security is trying to be Minority Report.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what they're trying to do.
You're guilty if they think your intent is nefarious, even though they have no proof of anything. All these groups are saying is we are unhappy with the way our government is going, where our government is going, how irresponsible they are with spending, how they're trampling on our rights, how the IRS is going nuts, how the NSA is going nuts.
Do you suppose they got 3 bald clairvoyants sitting in tubs of goo with somewhere hidden in a bunker somewhere?
You've had to have seen the movie to understand.
Yes. Tom Cruise.
From the report, actually, I was listening to a radio show the other day. Out of all the prophetic science fiction movies over the past decade or two, that one is the creepiest.
Yeah, it is.
Because of a lot of the things that they talk about in that movie have come to pass.
Well, the means by which they did it, the means are different, but yeah, you're right.
So, to carry on, the report that DES wrote states this: after years of only sporadic violence from violent domestic extremists motivated by anti-government ideologies, INA has seen a spike within the past year in violence committed by militia extremists and lone offenders who hold violent anti-government beliefs. These groups and individuals recognize government authority but facilitate or engage in acts of violence due to their perception that the United States government is tyrannical and oppressive, coupled to their belief that the government needs to be violently resisted or overthrown. Please give me some examples other than those whack jobs up in Vegas who were probably skinheads, had nothing to do with, they hated everybody. Please give me some examples. So let me see. What else are they ranting on about in this? No, that's the article. But that's another example of how the gun barrels are being aimed inside. You got ISIS, you've got Al Qaeda, and you've got the Taliban, who, if they step foot in this country, which they may already be here, would love nothing better than to put your head on a pike. Mm-hmm. They've proven that they'll do it to women and children,
especially if you're a Christian.
Oh yeah, I mean, and these aren't even mentioned in the DHS report.
No.
Just good old boys with John Deere hats. That's who scares them. And returning veterans.
And being against your government does not make you un-American. I mean, the founding fathers want you to be aware of what your government's doing. I just hope it's not too late. There's so many people that are still blind out there. I don't know if people are opening up their eyes or what. I don't know if enough people are. But when you have Dana Milbank, calling out Obama in the New York Times, you got to wonder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What did Milbank say again?
Hold on. Let me see if we can find it. I think it was one of the first stories on Drudge. Oh, actually, it was posted on my Facebook page. I reposted.
Also, on a side note, does anybody remember a couple years ago when this? I think he was a Marine in Iraq or Afghanistan. YouTube was videotaped urinating on a Taliban soldier in.
Oh, in Abu Ghraib.
It wasn't Abu Ghraib. It was. I believe it was on the battlefield,
mm-hmm.
and there were some dead Taliban, fighters, and he was urinating, which is you shouldn't do. I'm not exonerating him or anything, but I think he was busted in rank and lost pay and stuff. Well, anyway, he died suddenly the other day, 28 years old.
Wow. Okay. This is on Western journalism. You'll have to excuse the headline because they get kind of sensationalistic, but their articles are relatively well good. This liberal is probably kicking himself after he admitted this about America under Obama. Appearing on MSNBC's Morning Joe this week, Washington Post contributor Dana Milbank weighed in on Barack Obama's consistently declining approval rate. Host Joe Scarborough began the conversation by asserting that Obama seems to, quote, be a stubborn guy, noting that he doesn't like to be pushed around by expectations. Milbank, known for his generally left-leaning opinion columns, agreed. In fact, when responding to Obama's current 39% approval rating, he seemed surprised that the president is able to keep it as high as it is. Considering how miserable all of America is, a 39% approval rating isn't bad, he said, believe it or not. The writer cited frequent excursions as evidence that Obama cares little about public perception. How can he get around this vacation problem here, he asked. He is very stubborn when it comes to getting out there on the golf course. According to Milbank, Obama's predecessor handled the issue much more effectively when faced with national crises. President Bush said, look, I'm going to give up golf for the rest of my term, the commentator recalled, adding that the president isn't doing that. While Milbank might agree with many of his proposals, he lamented that the way that Obama is pursuing or not pursuing them is counterproductive. Why isn't he as forceful when it comes to, say, getting unemployment insurance through, when it comes to getting more of the domestic agenda through, he asked, gun control, all of the other things when he seems to give a speech and tiptoe away from it. The attitude Obama extols or exhibits regarding his leisure activities could actually benefit him if he would apply it to his job, Milbank concluded. And that's true, but here's the thing that irritates me. There are those out there that will poo-poo that away, saying, well, he needs a vacation, he needs to have free time. But there was an attitude that was developed back around the time of the Monica Lewinsky scandal with Bill Clinton. A lot of people walked around and said, hey, him doing that, he's no different than us. He's just one of the guys. Well, if that's being one of the guys, then there's something wrong with the guys. And I think they have that same attitude with Obama. Because to a lot of people, I think, especially those who defend him, his apologists, to them, he's one of them in more ways than politically.
Well, it's another example of Obama not flexing his muscles with the enemies of the United States on the world stage, instead flexing his muscles with the American people through the IRS.
He's got muscles?
Well, whatever. Did you see that picture of him lifting those big 10-pound dumbbells that one day?
Hey, I'm overweight. I'm a big fat guy. I can lift more than 10 pounds.
Well, again, he instead of actually confronting Putin, the real bad guys out on the world stage, he'd rather use the NSA against his own people, use the IRS against his own people, send Eric Holder down to what? Do you hear Eric Holder's asked that video of the black teen who was shot in Ferguson to be withheld?
Yeah. Because he said it would inflame racial tensions.
Oh, yeah, like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson don't?
Right. Well, he'll do all that. Either that or he'll blame Bush,
So it's just another example of, his enemies are at home. They are not on the world stage. He's transforming this country, like he said, fundamental transformation of the United States.
And
That's
what
he's doing.
You know what? And here's the rub, folks. You were warned about this before he was even elected in 2008. But you know what? A lot of you chose not to listen because you didn't like who was saying it. People like Rush Limbaugh. People like Glenn Beck. You gotta get past that, folks.
Not only that,
you gotta.
But you wanted to see yourself as, oh, look, I voted for the first black president. No, you're stupid. If you're voting for somebody for their color, you're stupid. Sorry. Well.
And you didn't want to, and everyone poo-pooed the fact that these same people like Beck, Hannity, Limbaugh were saying he was a Marxist. He is a Marxist, folks. He is a fascist. If you want to know, you look at popular culture, and that's where where a lot of you people get your political opinions from, I bet, those of you on the left. But what side of the political spectrum is usually associated with fascism? The right. People who support Reagan, who support Bush, you're called a fascist. Well, have you ever thought about what a fascist is? I mean, I can think of a good example from a movie, from Back to School. What Robert Downey Jr. played Rodney Dangerfield's son's best friend at college, and because he was rich and was a self-made man, he's a fascist. No. What is a fascist? You want to read about fascism? Get a book, Jonah Goldberg, Our Liberal Fascism. Get it. It is the best book on the history of fascism and how it's being applied nowadays. Get the book. Fascism does not necessarily have to have a military component, folks. Get that through your head. They use whatever they have at hand, and Mussolini in the 20s, 30s, and 40s used military because that's what was available.
It's a relationship between government and business. Government picks and chooses winners and losers, and typically those are socialist/communist nations that institute fascism, not capitalistic ever. Because it's totally...
Government control of private industry.
Yeah, that isn't that. Think of what the definition of capitalism is. Not that.
Okay, it's government control of private industry. Oh, has that happened in this country? Seems to me something involving GM happened in the last few years.
Go back to FDR too.
Yeah, I mean and you got the government control of the loan industry, not only mortgage loans, student loans, and no, you don't have the right to an education, folks. It is a commodity to be bought like anything else.
Going back to GE, Jeffrey Immelt, not only did GE not pay any taxes, but Jeffrey Immelt Obama put him on his economic, what was his position on his economic team?
Oh, God, I don't remember.
He was put on...
some kind of czar title.
Yes. And again, if that isn't fascism, if that's not the government picking and winning choosing winners and losers. And furthermore, where does GE do most of its business now? Where do most of the people who work for GE reside? China.
And folks, this is not the place for government. The federal government was never meant to do any of this, but you know why they're able to do it? Because we've allowed them to. Plain and simply, you guys get used to all the goodies that you're getting, and the goodies, by the way, if the state wants to do it, your state wants to do it, fine. It's not up to the federal government. There are only 18 powers enumerated to the federal government according to the Constitution. And if they do anything else is reserved to the states or the people. And if you're one of those that says, well, the Constitution doesn't matter, change it then. There are two mechanisms to do that in the Constitution itself. You can do it from the state level or through the Congress.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the economy. We're constantly told that we're in a recovery, yet 93 million people are out of the workforce. Those people, most of which aren't even included in our unemployment figures, which are what's our unemployment now? It's 6.3.
The real or the one they tell us?
Well, the one they tell us. The one they tell us.
It's something like that.
Well,
it's over 6.
I don't know how. And 40-something million people on food stamps. That's what's that? Approximately 1 in 7, 1 in 8 people are on food stamps right now.
About 1 in 8, close to it. 1 in 7.5 to 8.
Yeah. In the average household? There are 2 people at a household of 4. 2 people aren't working. So it's some crazy numbers like that. Well, anyway, we can file this next story under that same category. 77 million Americans have debts that are in collection.
That's more than a quarter of the country.
That typically means,
or almost,
either they've living beyond their means or buying cars and houses that they shouldn't, or they're using credit to live. And I would think that the latter is the case. Now, I would read you this article, but basically it ends up being an infomercial.
But if they're living above their means and buying houses that they can't afford, then that's something to look at too, because that means the government's guaranteeing those loans.
Yeah, there's
for the
been
most part
easy credit lately. Wait till the credit starts tightening and the interest rates start going up.
And that's the thing, folks. And I was having this argument with a guy at work, a discussion a few days ago. He's an immigrant from India, legal immigrant. He's trying to get his citizenship. He's a young guy. He's 29. He got educated over in India, and he thinks it's just wonderful that the government, the federal government there, provides for education at a low price. Because he was asking me one day, why is education so expensive here? And I said to him, well, you got government supplying, guaranteeing the loans and issuing the loans for kids to go to school. If they keep doing that and the universities see all this money coming in, don't you think they're going to raise their prices? That's why, because it's free money out there, but it's not free. It also came up that, this plan where people can be forgiven their student loans. I said, well, that's fine and dandy, but it's got to get paid back somehow. I said, you know what? I've got a student loan right now that I'm still paying off after many years. But you know what? I took that on, I took that loan on. I'm going to pay it, because if I don't, who's going to pay it? It's going to get paid by someone. I'll eventually pay some of it myself if I allow them to forgive it. But you take someone like me, multiply it by a few million. You're talking soon, before too long, you're talking about big bucks. And people don't realize that. They forgive stuff, but someone's going to pay it eventually, and it's going to trickle down. Stuff always rolls downhill, folks.
Back to the economy, another bit of news that a lot of people don't pay attention to is two of the big rollers there's two of the big boys in the economy, George Soros and Warren Buffett, are all running away from America. They're very bearish on the economy. They're selling their equities. They're getting rid of big things like Apple and Facebook, going into a bunch of precious metals, although they won't tell you that. They'll tell you you're stupid for buying gold and silver. Because
they want it all.
Of course.
And by the way, just a point of clarification, the difference between a bull market and a bear market is, the bull market, when a bull attacks, it usually goes up with its horns, which indicates buying. And a bear swipes down with its claws, indicating selling. That's the way I look at it. That's how I remember it.
Yeah. This is a good one. This is just I find this kind of funny. It's not funny. It's tragic for the people involved, but this has nothing. This is just a kind of a fun little article. It says 2 players die at the World Chess event.
Oh, God.
2 chess players died at the World Chess event. I didn't know chess was that stressful. And the most hilarious sentence in the whole article, they don't know what caused these men to die. It's just that they did. And a spokesman said, hold on, he says, while the causes of the 2 men's deaths are still unknown, they will raise questions about the mental and physical stress that chess tournaments place on players. Really? Come on, what are we, just a bunch of wussies?
And in a related story, a player had a season-ending hangnail injury in the World Tiddlywink Championships.
Come on now, they're destroying the NFL right now. Have you been watching any of the petty calls the refs are calling? I was watching a game the other night. There was like 20-something calls of hands to the face.
Well, look what they wanted to do with baseball this year. You saw what they wanted to do with baseball, didn't you?
What's that?
I don't know if they passed it in the winter meetings in the off season. They wanted to pass a rule that would prohibit a catcher from blocking the plate to keep a runner from, getting to the home plate, or for the runner couldn't go around him, or the runner couldn't slam into him.
Why don't you just put dresses on them?
It's like, dude, when I was in Little League, I was a catcher for a part of a season, and I had to play at the plate one time with a guy as big as me, which at the time I wasn't big. I mean, I was tall, but I wasn't big. And I stood my ground. The guy had to go over me. And
if any of you are old enough to remember this, a 1970 All-Star game when Pete Rose went barreling into Ray Fosse.
Yep.
Creamed him. I think Fosse was...
He was never the same.
He was never the same. I guess it basically... So I guess we're making the argument then for the.
But I was just reading. I'm reading this book right now. It's a fascinating book. It's called One Summer. It's about the summer of 1927 and all the events that happened. And I'm reading the chapter now on Babe Ruth's pursuit of the single season home run record, which he got that year. They were talking about baseball, how rough a game it was back then, where pitchers purposely hit batters quite often. Sometimes accidentally. Walter Johnson, he was the Nolan Ryan of his day. The guy was the fastest, hardest thrower there was.
The big train.
He would get so upset each time he hit someone that he come out of the game. I mean, this guy, he didn't purposely hit anyone. He was a real nice guy. But they were, oh shoot. I forgot now. I had a point to make here about what happened then.
Ty Cobb was a despicable human being.
They make mention of him there. He purposely he slide into a plate into a base, cleats up, and hope he hurt someone.
His teammates didn't even like him.
Oh, I know. What
and he was a horrible racist too. He once shot a black man in the bleachers.
Babe Ruth hated him.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, the movie Cobb, Tommy Lee Jones does a really good job. Probably not even good enough because he was despicable.
But fact remains. There has only been one player in all the years of organized baseball that has been killed in a baseball game, and that happened back in the 1920s. He was hit on the side of his head, died a few days later. I forgot the guy's name. I just read it in that book.
Remember Tony Conigliaro?
Oh, Tony Conigliaro his career was never the same either.
Got hit in the eye.
Who hit him? I forget now.
It was in the 60s. I don't know.
Yeah, it was late 60s. But yeah, I mean, they're trying to wussify everything and taking the fun out of everything.
You know what all sports really is a way to kind of play out war.
Yep.
And it instead of going out and actually fighting wars, we go on the field of the sports field instead of the battlefield.
And think of it this way. Cheerleaders are nothing but the women who would cheer on their gladiators or their husbands at war or whatever. It's no different, folks. And you know why? Here's why it works. Because each of the sexes, and I know if we had email, we would be getting email. Our email mailbox would be full by the end of the show. But you know why it works? Because each of the sexes is performing the role they were built to perform. Even Time Magazine said, men and women are different. Duh.
Hey, what'd you think of that 12-year-old girl at the Little League World Series? Did you see her yesterday?
No.
Holy man, she shut out the other team. What team is she from? I forget.
She pitches
from
overhand?
Pennsylvania. Oh yeah.
I'm guessing she doesn't throw like a girl then, huh?
She has long locks, I don't know, they dreads or whatever, but I don't know how many she struck out yesterday, but the team she's from Pennsylvania, they shut out the other team 4-0.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's right. The Little League World Series is starting up, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Because they usually have the final games are usually around Labor Day.
Love it. I played when I was in Little League. I played I was an all-star 2 years in a row. Never made it to the World Series, but we got pretty deep into the tournament. We never made it out of the city, but yeah, I loved it. You want to talk about something else here? This is kind of interesting.
Go ahead.
Do you know what the most popular boy's name in Britain now is?
It's got to be Mohammed.
Mohammed, but they don't say it because there's 3 different spellings for Mohammed, And
whatever.
They said they reported as Oliver being the most popular. However, Mohammed came in. It says right here that this means that Mohammed came in 15th. One spelling came in with 15th with 3,499 children. Different spelling was 23rd with 2,887, and a third spelling came in at 1,059, which is a total of 7,445 boys named Mohammed last year, easily beating out the second most popular name, Oliver, which got just 6,949. Now, they're 500 different, but the British newspapers reported it otherwise just because they were spelled differently.
Well,
Now, what's the point in this?
I think they just don't want to admit what's happening under their noses by not reporting it.
That's exactly right. We're talking multiculturalism here. We're talking about a country losing their own identity as we speak.
And don't all you pro-multiculturalists go and say, well, the U.S. is the multicultural. We've got all kinds. We're a melting pot. Well, yeah. That's because it was allowed to happen organically. It wasn't forced. When you try to force something, you have so many unintended consequences. It's ridiculous. And the unintended the cause of this unintended consequence over much of Europe is they just open their borders.
London's also a hotbed of virulent form of Islam.
France is another one.
Well,
do you remember the riots about 3 or 4 years ago in the Muslim sections of Paris?
Well, let me tell you, when I was in Germany 30 years ago, every major city in Germany has an area that's where the Turks live, mostly Islamic Turks. And it's typically the not so good areas of town, but it was that way 30 years ago all throughout Germany, and they segregate. Mm-hmm. They have, it's like going, basically you don't want to go in those areas because you might get knifed. Mm-hmm. But I remember getting off the trains in Frankfurt and being hit up by North African Muslims trying to sell me drugs, and they were very threatening, very in your face. And that was 30 years ago. I can only imagine what it's like now.
The reason why this is a bad thing, there's a lot of reasons. You're losing out your identity as a people if you allow yourself to be overrun by one culture other than your own. Your culture's going away. And this particular culture, though, is, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're all good little Muslims. All right? That doesn't, even if they say they're good little Muslims, we got a lot of good little Muslims here in the U.S. But guess what? I work with one. He's a great guy. Here's the problem. How many of them are speaking up about the bad Muslims? How many of them are doing something about the bad Muslims? They're not gonna.
Well, if you've ever taken any sociology classes, anthropology classes, whatever, I'm going off memory now, there are certain elements, if they exist within a certain group of people, then that group of people qualifies to become a nation of their own. First and foremost, is a common is a language. Mm-hmm. When a country ceases to have one language and has two, well, then that other group has a reason to consider its own statehood. And you know where we see that? Quebec.
Yeah, I was exactly going to say that.
Quebec is always trying to separate from the rest of Canada.
Yep.
Another element is religion. There's three other elements, and I hate to just throw this stuff out, but anyway, in Southern California, we already got those elements. There's parts. Well, heck, there's parts of Phoenix you can go into.
Well, they speak three languages in California. Main languages: English, Spanish, and dude.
But the thing with the difference between England and Southern California is this. This is the most important thing. Okay, there's a difference in language, and of course you've got the La Raza and Mecha and all those who want to
La Conquistas.
Yeah, La Conquistas who want to start their own country. Okay, blah blah blah. The language is a big obstacle, but but basically, they're Christian, they're Catholic, they're Roman Catholic,
and in many ways they do assimilate with the culture,
and they assimilate. However, in London, you have the people are of the Islamic persuasion. Not only do they have they speak a different language, but they have a radically different religion, and that religion does not coexist with other religions. See,
because it refuses to.
You're seeing Christians being beheaded in Iraq, and you're seeing Gaza lobbing bombs at the Jews in Israel.
Look at your history, folks. Look at your history, folks.
They don't live well with other people. Don't play well with.
No, it's because they refuse to. Look at the history. You look at the when Islam first came into being in the 5th century, they spread like wildfire across Asia, Africa, to a certain extent Europe,
with the sword.
With the sword. They would not take no for an answer. It was no different now than it is. It's no different now than it was then. Either you convert or you die.
Try raising a daughter in one of those societies.
Yep. That we're seeing it playing out. I keep seeing this every time I see these stories about what they're doing to the Christians in Iraq. I think back to how they spread Islam in the 5th century. It's the same thing, folks. Don't be fooled.
If they're not killing them, then they're taking their girls and...
Well, they're doing that too. They're doing that in addition to, they're killing the men. They're taking the women and children, female children, and making them their wives, or selling them into slavery. Raping them. And if they do kill them, they rape them before they kill them.
I mean, that's complete horror on earth. That's just evil. It's like something was opened up recently, and these demons came out of it. I can't even imagine the humans doing that to one another.
And the thing is folks, America's ripe for that in many ways.
Well, because we're so, I'm doing air quotes here, we're so tolerant, and we've been sold this bill of goods that Islam is a religion of peace when everything indicates otherwise. Who was the writer that I've quoted before? Not Walt Whitman. The Thoreau. No, not Thoreau. Emerson.
Oh, Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, and I compare this to what groups like CARE say. I'm sorry I can't hear you because your actions are so loud. In other words, I can't. What you're saying makes no sense to me because your actions belie your words.
By the way, just so you know, CAIR, folks, CAIR, is the Council for Arab. I forget. American. I forgot now.
Relations.
Oh no, American Islamic Relations. Yeah.
Yeah. They're basically apologists. They're basically like the magician who says, "Hey, don't pay attention to this hand, pay attention to the other hand," when it's the one that you can't see. It's
like the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
They're apologists, and they use our tolerance that we've been so accustomed to relishing over the last few decades. They use our tolerance against us. That but basically you can't call them on some of their atrocities for fear of being called anti-Islamic, Islamophobe, or whatever word.
What we have to do, folks, is we got to get over fear of being called out. We got to get over fear of being called a racist. We got to get over all kinds of fears and say, I don't care. Beck gets a little bit carried away on a lot of things, but there is one thing I admire the man for. He says, you can call me a racist all you want. You can call me this, that, or the other. You can take all my belongings away. You can take all my money. I've been there before. It ain't going to be any different. I'm not afraid. That's why he runs off the mouth like he does. Because he's not afraid of losing it all. Because he's been there before.
I mean, you have people out there that are call people like Scott and myself, call us climate deniers, and want to actually imprison people who think the way we do. If there are people like that out there, what's to say sometime in the near future that we're not allowed to just utter the words that we just did regarding Islam?
You know what it all boils down to? There's too many people out there and all throughout history that just don't want people to live the lives the way they want to. They just can't stand the fact that people have freedom to choose how they want to live their lives.
Well, that sounds like a liberal to me. It's, they
Sound familiar?
They talk about tolerance all the time, as long as you agree with them. But the minute you don't, you're the.
What was the saying? A conservative. God.
Well, there was, what Teddy Roosevelt said about. Churchill
Winston
said.
Churchill, yeah.
Winston Churchill said.
No, I'm thinking about something entirely different. I can't remember. It's something about difference between conservatives and liberals. How liberals will do something because they don't want you to do it, or say something because they don't want you to do it, and conservatives will say something because they don't think you should do it, or something. I don't remember what it was.
I like Andrew Wilkow's. He said, liberalism, the idea is so good they're made mandatory.
Exactly.
That's true, though. I mean,
the guy's got a point. He says, he says, we're right, they're wrong. That's the end of the story. Go ahead, prove me wrong. You guys, if you don't have Sirius XM, you have to, just for Andrew Wilkow.
Oh yeah, he's a pit bull.
He is totally a pit bull.
So I'm gonna tick off a few more liberals here. I'm gonna switch gears real fast. In Pittsburgh, the leaves are already changing because they've had such a cold summer.
And it started late there too, didn't it?
Yeah, but the beauty of being a man-made global warming advocate is they just say, hey, that's just more proof that the climate's changing.
Well, you see, they don't call it global warming anymore. It's called climate change.
Climate change.
Climate always changes, though, folks.
It's called weather.
Exactly. Well, I don't know. We don't have so much weather here in Phoenix.
And then there was another article a week ago that said because of the cool summer back east, people are getting depressed.
Oh, my God.
So, no, maybe they're depressed because life in Obamaville is less than
Obama's America.
Impressive.
I like saying Obama's America.
So did you, with the time left, did you want to talk about Robin Williams? Or?
Yeah. I don't go out of my way to really get all worked up about celebrities passing away, but I've only done it twice in my whole life. John Lennon was the first one, and Robin Williams is the second one. And with John Lennon, it was, the guy, he was one of my favorite musicians and all that, and it just happened all of a sudden. The night that it happened was my last night of living in Sacramento, California, before I took the long drive down the hill back here to Phoenix to move back here permanently. And I didn't really have a chance. My grandmother had just passed away the day before, and it was kind of a lot to process. I mean, her passing away, moving back here, uprooting myself, so when I heard that he passed away, it was kind of hard to process that because I was processing so much other stuff, because he was such a big part of my teenage years, But Robin Williams, it was just so much. The guy, I don't want to get all weird, but there was so many times, I don't know how down I was, that he would just lift me up just by looking at some of the facial expressions the guy made. The guy was, and not only that, but he was just a nice guy. He appreciated his fans. He didn't take them for granted. He always had times for his fans, and whenever he was given an accolade or whatever, he was kind of humble about it. He didn't let it go to his head, or anything. That's just the kind of guy he was. The guy was a genius.
Wasn't Jonathan Winters an inspiration?
He was, yeah, because Kevin and I used to sit and watch Jonathan Winters with our dad as we were kids.
He was goofy.
And we didn't know who the guy was, and Dad said Dad used to love him. And we'd sit and watch, because he had a short-lived show back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And we used to just love it. We used to love watching him. And Robin Williams and he became friends, because actually Jonathan Winters ended up on Mork and Mindy for the last season or two.
Forgot about that.
He played he and Mork and Mindy's son, Mirth. And it was just, when I found out that he passed away, my mom texted me around, it was toward the end of the day. It was like 4:15, 4:30 that day. Did you hear about Robin Williams? No, what happened? He's dead. They think it's a suicide. I go, Oh my God. We were just talking about him like earlier that day at work before any of us knew about how for a few of us at work, he was our all-time favorite comedian. I mean, the guy was just a genius. And as a little tribute, I'm going to play a little something.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Sure.
The first thing when I saw news of his death, that went through my mind is I'm kind of a weirdo in the sense that one of my favorite movies of his was, wasn't a lot of other people's favorite movies, and that was What Dreams May Come. Because I'm always infatuated with what happens after we all pass on. And in case you don't know what the movie is about, it's about Robin Williams, who ends up dying in a car crash with his son, and his wife, unable to bear it, ends up committing suicide. And the rest of the movie is about him going through the underworld, going to hell, and finding her there in a self-imposed corner of hell where she would spend eternity. And and he wanted to bring her back.
Cuba Gooding Jr. was in it too.
Yes. Well, anyway, the first thing that struck my mind was the irony of he had committed suicide in the movie, which deals heavily with suicide. Anyway, that was my take.
And it just came out yesterday that his wife revealed he was in the early stages of Parkinson's disease.
Well, that's not a good look at Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, but he also, you understand though, from what I had heard, that contributes to the depression he already had.
Yeah.
Michael J. Fox didn't have depression to start with. That's definitely a mitigating circumstance.
Well, actually, any physical ailment. I understand arthritis can cause depression.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to, just as a tribute to him, my favorite quote by him, basically to paraphrase, was, "We're all born with a little spark of madness. Never let it go." And I'm going to play a little brief 4.5 minute clip here. It's off his first album, Reality, What a Concept. And I gotta set it up for you because some of the references were from the time it was recorded, which was like 1978, 1979 when Jimmy Carter was president. And it's basically him. It's called Grandpa Funk. And it's basically him 80 years in the future or so as an old man reminiscing and looking back at the history that had happened since 1978, 79. And it's quite funny. So here we go.
I give the pigeons my methadone so they come back. Sometimes I withhold it and watch them go through cold squab. It's very strange to have so many mutants in one place. But I guess ever since World War III, things haven't been the same. You probably don't even remember it, though. All 45 seconds of it. You remember that? You remember when Carter came on the air and went, "Thank you very much, on your own, good night." Used to play an alien. Used to do that. Yeah, not that funny since they've landed, though. Yeah, they weren't the little suckers we thought they were. They turned out to be 8 feet tall and black, and they were pissed. And that's why I have to live here in this cave. Okay. I remember lots of old stuff. I remember the great quake of '85 when all the people in California surfed to Denver. Right on. Now, come here, I'll gum you. That's about all I can do with it. There are some good memories, though. I'd like to show you something special. You'll have to move real close. Yeah, you kids, you shouldn't have come through the force field. About this time of night, they send through the clones, and you got to get out before they do. But if you meet one, all you have to do is screw them up. It's turned sideways. And that overamps the vision monitors, and I bring them in here and make jukeboxes out of them. Because I even remember back to the days of Woodstock. You remember that? That goes back 80 years now. That goes back, he said, let me take you higher. Your girls used to dance in front of the amplifier going, I don't know why. I saw some of the best brains of my time turn to mud there. But there was some spirit, some craziness, some madness there. So take care of yourself, sneak on out. But one thing from me to you. Yes. Stay a little full goose bozo. Keep the spirit of madness in you. Just a little touch of it. Just enough so you don't become stupid. Just a little touch of madness will keep you alive. Because no one in the world knows how to tax that. There was an old crazy dude who used to live a long time ago. His name was Lord Buckley. And he said a long time ago, he said, people, they're kind of like flowers. And it's been a privilege kind of walking in your garden. My love goes with you.
He had the ability to elicit so many different emotions, and within one piece of acting, stand-up, whatever. I mean, he did it just there. I mean, the guy, and he wasn't really raunchy. He wasn't, he'd throw a few words out here and there, 4-letter words, but overall he wasn't all that vulgar. You know why? He didn't have to be.
Well, and he probably used them for effect, and they had more meaning than somebody like Chris Rock, who every other word is the F word.
Or Eddie Murphy.
You don't even hear it anymore. It loses its impact. A good F word every once in a while, placed in the right context, can be funny.
And it's like I've always said with Eddie Murphy, his best stuff was when he was forced to not swear and use vulgarity, like on Saturday Night Live.
Gotta think.
Exactly. Anyway, folks, that's it for today, for this week. But we will be back next Saturday at 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be replaying this show on Phoenix Underground Radio at www.phoenixundergroundradio.com every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you then.